Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Robert Wright. I'm Managing Director of Davis Tanner, and I'm really pleased to welcome you to the launch of our Global Destination Report. Davis Tanner we're a communications agency that works in the business events sector, so our clients are destinations and major venues all around the world, and industry bodies and trade shows such as the lovely people here at IBTM. And we also have our advocacy and engagement platform that we call the Business of Events. And the Business of Events is really here to help develop policy ideas and policy agendas that ultimately support the global business event sector. And we do that through conducting research and publishing research, also holding events and engaging with governments and policymakers to develop some of those policy ideas and objectives. This is the second report that we published. We published our very first Global Destinations Report in the middle of last year, which is a very different time, as I'm sure you can imagine. And today we're really pleased to be launching our second report, which this year has been done in partnership with our friends at Visit Britain and our friends here at IBTM World. I am now going to stop talking, and I am going to hand you over to my colleague, who's our Associate Director for News and Content, Martin Fullard, who's going to talk you through the findings of the report. He'll also tell you how to download that report at the end of the session. And it just remains for me to say thank you very much for being here, and I hope you have an amazing IBTM World.
Thank you very much, Robert. Now, it goes without saying that there's no way we can have had a whole raft of slides on the screen pointing out all the different stats and numbers and the whole rest of it, because we want you to download the report at the end. So towards the end of the session, a QR code will appear on the screen, and that will take you to our new content and engagement platform where you will be able to download the report in full. So for the purpose of this session, what I've done is I've pulled out what I thought were some interesting statistics, and we're going to have some commentary on it from our panel. So by way of formal introduction, Melissa, if I could ask you just to quickly introduce yourself to the room.
Sure. Good afternoon. Melissa Riley, Vice President of Convention Sales and Services with Destination DC. We're the Convention and Visitors Bureau in Washington, DC.
Rachel.
Hi there, I'm Rachel Boriston and I work for London Convention Bureau. I'm the head of destination for the UK. So we're part of London and Partners as well.
So, first point that I found quite interesting is where the industry sits in the eyes of government, certainly within their structure. And according to the report, 56% of Convention Bureau and the whole rest of it report to domestic tourism departments. And I know that causes discussion, perhaps friendly debate on whether they think that that's the correct area in which to be. I know there are some strong views in the room, looking at James Latham, ready to stand up and share his views on it. But I guess, really, Melissa, where do you fit in? Does that resonate with you? Are you part of the tourism mix? Do you think that's a reasonable position to be in?
Yes, absolutely. And this is a very typical model for the United States. Most of us are not a government agency, but we do fall under the tourism umbrella. There's a philosophy in the U.S. that a great tourism destination, a great leisure destination makes a great meetings destination. And again, I know this is very controversial, and I hate to bring up the dreaded B word, bleisure, but that is a philosophy that does exist quite dominantly in the U.S. But I think there's a huge opportunity there because business events are so often misunderstood and do fall under that tourism umbrella. We see it in the funding, we see it in the marketing efforts. The tourism side, the leisure side gets all of the publicity, and the meetings and events side is left to kind of, sing our own song and do our own storytelling. So this is very common in the United States.
Rachel, what about you? What are your views?
I totally agree with that in that the tourism side of things are often maybe seen as a little bit more sexy. I think business events, as you say, we have to promote ourselves a little bit harder. I think what's interesting is that we, as London and Partners, so London CVB sits within London and Partners, which is the business growth and destination agency for London. So we actually kind of sit alongside direct foreign investment, and we understand that business events absolutely underpin industry economic growth. So we're a little bit different, I suppose, and we kind of straddle tourism as well as that kind of business, that side of things as well. So slightly different to the US. I think London has always been quite innovative and forward-thinking in that. So before leisure became a thing, we kind of already understood that model. And it's interesting to see now we've got like Barcelona and partners coming up. So I think it's a model that's kind of being more widely recognized across Europe as well now.
I wonder if attitudes change eventually, that governments might actually insist that all their domestic departments have an event focus, because, you know, surely a department for health should be actively courting big healthcare conferences and so on. So I think there should be perhaps more of a dynamic mix across, but that's a conversation certainly for the pub, I imagine. So next question then, the next point. Now, according to the report, most destinations and CVBs, about 52%, so just over half, have seen core funding remain the same or increase from 2019 to 2022, considering there's a big pandemic in the middle there. But 42% have seen their core funding decrease, which is quite interesting. North America, however, has seen one of the biggest increase in budgets. Now, Melissa, do you recognise that trend? I mean, how has your funding fared, if you're allowed to share such potentially sensitive information?
Well, I think if there is any silver lining during the pandemic, it is the loss of revenue that came to our destinations that made what we do so much more relevant. All of a sudden, the government recognized that, well, wait a minute, there isn't money funded through bed tax that now serves social services and some of the social platforms within our respective destinations. So it's often seen in the United States that our funding is majorly contributed through the bed tax. Well, when nobody's staying in hotels, clearly we have no funding. And so that post-pandemic, there was nowhere to go but up. And we're about level with where we were in 2019. But what you're seeing a lot within the United States is an advocacy for additional dollars. And so we're going through what we call a tourism recovery tax. And so we're working with a separate agency to add additional percentage points onto our existing bed tax to drive more revenue. So for example, in Washington, D.C., that could be an addition of up to 20 million US dollars that we will get if this passes our local government legislation. So that will go for more promotion both on the leisure side and in the meetings and event side, and overall awareness. But you're seeing this. Boston just passed this successfully. You're seeing the likes of LA going through this at the moment. So you're seeing more and more destinations seeing the opportunity to not just regain, but add more dollars for promotion through additional taxes.
Rachel, what's your view on that?
So sadly, we sit within the 42%. So our budgets have been redistributed, shall we say. Obviously, we all know the unprecedented times post-COVID. There's been a need to redistribute funds to other places, and we recognise that it's frustrating. But so we've had to become a little bit more creative about how we then support those budgets and how we can promote ourselves in a way that then brings more tourism back to the UK and into London, to bolster our economy. You know, we were really fundamental in supporting with the London Recovery Board and the Let's Do London campaign. So we actually kind of got more strategic, creative partners to help to put budget into that, because they're the people who have the funds to support that, because they recognize the importance of it and the importance of us investing to boost that kind of tourism and visitor economy within business events. So yes, they've been cut. We've been very innovative and creative in how we've managed to manage that. And so we're maybe doing more with less. So well done us.
Well, I mean, perhaps, have you got the freedom, or is there the inclination to go and find other funding models like sponsorship? We're not saying you have to walk around like a Formula One driver wearing brands all over yourself, but I mean, have you got that freedom to maybe go and find third-party sponsorship? Or with that, do you think might be a conflict of interest? Is that too dirty?
I think we have to tread very carefully. I think we sit within a few different areas of where we get our revenue, so I think we just have to be sensitive to that.
But I think what's interesting is when you look at the landscape, in our world, we tend to stay very myopic in what we do, right? We only stay within our own industry. So many of us are membership-based, and so sponsorship becomes a challenge oftentimes. But we fail to look outside of our industry for very unique opportunities. So there's a competitive city of Washington, D.C., and when you look at their board makeup, it's big industry. It's telecom. It's automotive. It's the industries that thrive within their region. And I think we fail to look for those resources outside of our normal, the same pot that we go back to every single time. So I think there's a huge opportunity for us as a community to, expand our horizons a little bit and look at very unique places and also foster some creativity. You get creative when you have less to work with.
Absolutely that, and I think that's exactly what we've seen. Although it's not ideal that our budgets have decreased, it has, inspired that innovation and that creativity and a bit of a change. And it's exciting, to think that we're kind of self-generating more, so have maybe a little bit more autonomy. But yeah, it's something that we're kind of seeing as we move forwards.
Let's add to this then the topic of subvention funding. So most respondents in the report stated that they had not really seen a change in international, regional, national or overall bid or subvention funding since 2019. So does this indicate that governments have faith in the value of what you do? And I guess what's the general sentiment going forwards regarding subvention funding, Melissa?
Yeah, ours has remained the same, and we are very fortunate to be in that space. Our subvention is actually funded through our large Congress Center. So if anybody recognizes the value of business events, it's them because they're the main beneficiary. And so we've been very grateful, and that has remained the same. What has changed is the competitiveness with which we give those dollars out. Because coming out of COVID, obviously, there were massive discounts. There was huge opportunity to negotiate far more than we ever had before. But now that we're in a space where, in Washington, for example, our occupancy is still down slightly, but our rates are through the roof. And so we don't necessarily need to negotiate as much as we did previously. And so the subvention becomes a very valuable tool that we use.
So we don't offer subvention, and we never have really offered subvention. So it hasn't changed for us, but it remains that we don't do it. But what we enjoy is seeing that money put back into London to enhance everything that London offers. So whether that's across industry, London is a big industry for finance, tech, fintech, retail, urban. We want to reinvest in those areas as well so that it is still an attractive business events destination. Also, I think one of the major selling points of London is our culture, our arts. So we want to see that money reinvested. So although we don't offer subvention, we hope that the value that London offers as a city is enough of the draw to bring people in, and that's why they want to come to London as a destination. And so far, that's working really well for us.
Glad to hear it.
We do lose business to them all the time.
Ooh, right, keep it clean on the stage. We don't want to see things getting into a brawl.
Friendly competition.
Good. So obviously we're sort of now steering the conversation towards sort of international business, and this was, I thought, it was an interesting one, but not perhaps totally unsurprising. So compared to 2019, the report says a significantly larger proportion of respondents reported seeing a decrease in the volume of their international business in 2022, while there was an increase in both regional and national business events. Again, really, do you both sort of recognise that trend? Is international business a priority for you in the same way that it was? Do you anticipate it will come back, or do you think that the landscape has sort of changed forever?
So our international business is absolutely important to us. It always has been, it always will be. Obviously, we saw an increase in our domestic tourism, as I'm sure all destinations did. Nobody could go anywhere else. So we have capitalized that, and we continue to invest in that. International business will always be important. International relations, meeting with one another from all across the globe will, again, underpin business. So business events, it makes sense that international will remain. It's interesting, I think we're only 15% down on our 2019 numbers, and that's even without China as an international market. So we understand that actually, if China was still there, it would actually be back stronger. So it's absolutely something that we'll continue to invest in.
And we're interesting in Washington in that, our American associations and our national associations are often much larger than some of the global counterparts. And many of our American associations, up to 50% of their delegates can be international. So when we look at the international landscape, we like to differentiate whether you're looking at an American association with a large contingency, or is this truly a globally rotating Congress? And so obviously we've seen numbers down in both. Where we have been successful is the long-term booking cycle. And so while during COVID, things immediately halted, there was still inquiries. There was still activity around the long-term placement of events for the future. And then, of course, in the United States, we have a very big visa issue and access into the United States that, through the advocacy of the U.S. Travel Association, they're very working daily to minimize the wait time, to open up more offices around the world to be able to have access, so that visa issue becomes less and less of a deterrent. And so right now, that is our biggest challenge in the U.S. Is that visa issue. And until that's resolved, regardless of pandemic or not, that will continue to put some questionable activity.
What I would say about our international business, I suspect probably the reason that it's come back with such force is because we're perceived as a very safe destination. We opened our borders quite early. We were very quick to welcome people back in, and I think, fortunately, that was the right decision to make. So I think that's really helped us to kind of bring back that international business as well.
Glad to hear it. So let's move on to one of my favourite areas of the whole thing, legacy. So this was quite a big part of the report. The legacy of meetings was clearly especially important to respondents, with the majority, 96%, so nearly a full house, saying it was very important or somewhat important, leaving just weirdly 5% saying it's not important. I don't know how legacy isn't important in any context anyway. But where does the emphasis of event legacy come from? Is it being driven by yourselves, or is it organisers, or is it actually an insistence from your governments and whoever else?
So this is a really interesting question, one that we've been kind of curious about in Washington. Is legacy, much like a sustainability, is it a nice to have or is it a have to have? And I think it depends on the audience that you're talking to. We have put together a very dedicated campaign around legacy. We are pushing it with our clients. And I think depending on where in the world you are, will determine whether it's a must-have or a nice-to-have. I think it sadly becomes a secondary or tertiary priority oftentimes, depending on the mentality of the organization that you're working with. And it becomes something that, after your core logistics, is, okay, well, let's do something good. I need to feel good for a quick hour and then leave. But as we know, that's not a legacy project, right? That's a short social responsibility initiative. And so I think there's a lot of communication, there's a lot of advocacy that we as a community need to have and need to continue to push forward, that this isn't something that you can just come into a destination for 3 days, leave an economic footprint and leave. You have to contribute socially. You need to, affect the residents of the cities that you meet in and have that positive impact. Because if not, business and leisure will continue to have a negative image, that you're taking away the basic services that we as residents get. Whereas if you show the social legacy, there's more of an opportunity to bring awareness of the positive impact.
I totally agree. I think it should be absolutely a collaborative effort. I think you're right. You have to understand who the delegation are, the purpose of the event, and whether that legacy can't just be there for the sake of being there. Otherwise, it's inauthentic, it's disingenuous. There's no point in it, really, is there? So I think you have to think very carefully about how you can leave a legacy that really does align. And it benefits the both of you. It benefits that community and that surrounding area. It then, therefore, benefits the CVB, but it also benefits that event organizer as well and that association. I think when we think about legacy, like at a larger scale, let's think about the Olympics. It was 10 years ago. Legacy is a huge part of that. We're 10 years on, and let's look at how Stratford, where we have the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park, has really started to, or continued off the back of the Olympics. It's had so much regeneration, lots of investment. It's now more of a cultural hub. It's growing into a destination in itself within London. So when we think about those large-scale legacies, I think the Olympics is a really good one to start at. We've just won the bid for Eco City, and we're now working with them to think about how we can extend that positive legacy, which really aligns with our sustainability values as well. So that there was a really clear kind of collaborative piece that we could work with them with, because so much of what they were doing aligns with what we're doing as a city. So yeah, I think you're right. It has to be collaborative, but it has to be mutually beneficial as well. So you really have to understand and get under the skin of what everyone wants to achieve there.
And how do you evaluate its success, right? How do you put a tangible...
What are the metrics?
Yes, exactly. And I think that's where there's a massive opportunity for us as an industry, is to figure out how to
Define that.
storytell
Yeah,
and define
absolutely.
it. Like X was benefit became a benefit because of. I mean, I don't think we've figured that out quite yet.
No.
No, I think the Olympics is an interesting one. I know it's heresy to contextualise an event that isn't a business event, but the legacy that you mentioned is interesting in the cultural hub. Yes, Stratford completely regenerated, but also the UK now has one of the best Olympic teams going because it's inspired a generation of young people to get into sport, and we are now seeing that. We are producing some of the world's most fantastic athletes, considering we're a fraction of the size of the US, who would historically dominate the medal tables. Great Britain is now up there. That's a legacy of that event as well. So, I mean,
And
you can measure that by just going to the medal table in the next Olympics.
and then, but then, like you say about metrics, can we start to then attribute, like, the lionesses and that interest in, football and female footballers? Like, is that a knock on from the Olympics? So it's really hard to track. But yeah, we're now seen as more of a sporting destination, which is absolutely fantastic, and probably direct effect from the Olympics.
But
And
in a business event context, much harder to
Yes,
articulate.
absolutely
But we
sorry.
that conversation can't stop because it really is going to be fundamental to the future of the sector. No
I would
doubt.
love to see people put forth case studies on this more often. You see occasionally a destination or somebody will put forth, a long-term case study, but I think there needs to be more of that. I think there needs to be, an amplification of the positive impact. And it could be via an individual, right? It could be the youth, it could be, elder care, it could be what have you, but understanding the core mission of the organization and where your underserved communities or your greatest opportunities are, and matching those is key to success.
absolutely.
Absolutely. There are some examples out there. We can all discuss that later on. Brilliant stuff. I want to get on to the last point now before we make the report available for download. So respondents felt that their destination's business events departments or team profile and how it was regarded by their either city, regional or national government had increased to the tune of 55% since 2019. So really, do you sort of agree with that statement? Obviously it was an appalling time during the pandemic with the sector largely ignored on a global scale, but this seems to suggest that actually your government superiors are waking up to actually what you really do. Is that something you recognise?
Yeah, I think so. It's a tricky one for me to comment on because I'm relatively young in this role, but I absolutely think that there has been so much more recognition from us. What I would love to see is actually that change in government so that business events in itself kind of is recognised, but to have that, we need to understand that it's so multifaceted and it spans across so many different industries. Everyone in government needs to be very joined up into that as well, and I just don't know how that's managed. But as I say, the Convention Bureau was a key part of the London Tourism Recovery Board, so I think that really kind of elevated our position. The fact that we did the Let's Do London campaign, which was a domestic campaign that was so successful, it then got rolled out to domestic markets. And that was an initiative led by us in the London Tourism Recovery Board. I think that's really put us in good stead, and that's been a very visual indicator to everyone that we are of importance, we're relevant, and this sector is incredibly relevant, and yeah.
And I noted at the start of the conversation that you don't know what you have until it's gone, right? And if there's any, again, positive lining of COVID, it's that people now recognize the impact because we serve so many different sectors through the economic development that we charge that now our governments are taking notice. We actually are in London, Destination DC is next week, and our Deputy Mayor for Economic Development is joining, which probably wouldn't have happened before, but he now recognizes the relevancy of what we're doing. Again, spending more time on the leisure side, so we need to continue that conversation around business events and continue to elevate, our sector of the business. But I think it's great. We're seeing at least some impact in the right direction from our government services supporting what we do more so. And with the recovery tax, they're fully on board and supportive, which is exactly what we need. Whereas that might have been a much longer conversation previously. Now they understand what the benefit to the whole city is.
Great. Okay, now I am going to press this green button, and on the screen you will see a QR code. This will take you to the brand spanking new Business of Events content and engagement platform, where you can stay up to date, give us a follow, subscribe to the newsletter, and you'll be kept up to date with all the latest wheelings and dealings as we chart our course through the murky waters of policy. That should take you to the website where you'll be able to download the report. If you have any problems with the QR code, the web address there is at the bottom, thebusinessofevents.com hyphenated. You can go to the website directly. If you're still having any issues downloading, please do come and see myself or Robert or any of the Davies Tanner team. Hopefully you will find it interesting. And if you want any more information, or if you feel like you'd like to weigh in with your own commentary, then by all means do come and find me and give me a shout. Before, while we've got about 2 minutes left, I'm quite happy to invite any statements from the floor. Not so much questions, because obviously the panel haven't, seen the report in full either. But if anyone has anything they would like to add to the conversation, raise your hands and we will get a microphone over to you. Otherwise, class dismissed. A round of applause, please, for our panel, Melissa and Rachel. Thank you.